Busy news morning, but it's time now to take a look at what else is making the headlines in the international papers. And here to help me sift through them, and indeed all the small print, is author and diversity consultant Vernal Scott. Very good morning, Vernal. Should we have a look at this day, because it's an economic fight back, isn't it? Why fixing refineries can save Buhari's economic plan. Of course, these four state-owned Nigerian refineries coming back online in July.
Yes.
And it sounds like a lot of hope is being pinned on them, even if they only produce about half the fuel required by the country.
Yes, I'm sorry
You've nicked my copy, haven't you?
Yes. The economic picture in any country is important, and that's the main asset for them. And I think that what's missing is, I think, a comprehensive assessment of all their resources, frankly. And given that this is not going to give them everything they need economically, what else can they do?
It will go some way.
It'll go some way, but I think that a better, more comprehensive, holistic economic plan must be needed.
It is slightly bonkers, isn't it, that it produces so much crude oil. It has only 4 refineries, so I think 2 in Port Harcourt and then 2 elsewhere. It's still having to export a lot of the oil to bring it back in. It can only provide something like 19 million litres of fuel a day, and it's shy of 21 million.
Yes, and I think that's why somebody needs to get a grip, really, so that it actually is something that they can be much more confident about as a resource. You know, to actually have to import their own product it sounds a bit strange.
This sounds quite important to Buhari as part of his overall game plan to kind of get the country economically on the right footing. I'm just reading some breaking news, actually, that Nigeria's President Buhari has been advised by his transition committee to end the fuel subsidy programme and to actually to privatise these 4 refineries. Senior sources are telling Reuters. We get these heavy gasoline subsidies, reliance on the imports. The underperforming refining system is just doing the country no good. Of course, the money that they're having to pay out to import this fuel means that they end up with this hefty fuel bill every year.
Yes, I mean, I'd like the sound of that breaking news, actually, James, because I think sometimes going private is the way forward. The mindset in the private industry, in private industries and private people who run them, it seems there's a lot more, I think, geared towards making economics work.
But if you look if you see the looks of Shell and BP going into countries like this, then they're accused of just sort of siphoning off the value added. How do they make sure that the country as a whole actually enjoys the benefits of oil? Look at how Norway has done it over the last sort of 40 years or so. They have a huge sovereign wealth fund. This is potentially something that Nigerians can learn from.
Well, you know, you're not going to get something from giving nothing. I think there's got to be some kind of compromise, but clearly the current situation isn't good enough. It needs new management, and I think that getting the private sector in can't be a bad thing.
I'm sure we'll see developments on that. The Star in SA, and we're going to completely ignore the top story and look at the one at the bottom because he's at it again. President Zuma setting his sights on building Zuma Square. And, of course, this isn't a celebration of his life's work. No, this is going to be a shopping centre, a mall in his honour.
Yes, you've got to have a certain level, I think, of arrogance to actually do what he's planning to do. But, you know, he's got private business supporting it. He's got a business partner who's willing to fund the mall. And, you know, if people are going to, if it's going to create some jobs, you know, locally, then I suppose it can't be a bad thing.
Well, we'll speak to our South African, our special correspondent who's in South Africa at the moment, Sarah Firth. We'll be speaking to her about that in a short while. Let's have a look at the Independent, and it's very much a UK story, but it's got a real impact on Africa as a whole. New migrant rules to cost the NHS thousands of nurses.
Yes.
In 1 year alone, I think it was 27,000 nurses were imported. 16,500 of them were from Africa.
Yes, and the essence of the story has to do with a change in policy to do with the level of salary that people who are immigrants here, who are workers in the NHS, must be earning. Otherwise, there's a risk that they'll be sent back to their country of origin.
But it seems slightly bonkers. There were countries, one of them will pop into, I think it might have been Malawi, where they actually trained 600 nurses and only 50 of them survived because the other 550 beetled off to where the money was better.
Yes.
That's not good for Africa, is it?
It isn't. However, you know, the NHS is not in a position, I think, to lose the effectively 3% of its staff. They provide a vital service. They've contributed for years to the NHS. And the idea that a new policy that hasn't been thought through could see 3% of the NHS essential staff disappear is quite ridiculous. Somebody needs to sort it out.
Certain numbers are already capped because there's this annual cap of 20,700 standard visas, and then they have to make sort of special allowances. But this latest idea of having this £35,000 floor limit before you can actually keep your job, they're talking about turfing people out who are already here, not just stopping more people who would be valuable to the National Health Service.
Exactly, that's the point, that it's about losing staff who've been working in the NHS for the last few years. You're getting all that investment that has gone into getting those people here in the first place, into their training, into their contributions. Suddenly to lose that it makes absolutely no sense. You're going to have to find replacements, train those replacements, and you know, I mean, who in the NHS earns £35,000 a year? Very, very few people. So it's not looking good unless some kind of intervention happens to turn this ridiculous policy around. It's you know, we're looking at disaster, I think, in the NHS. What
should we look at now? Should we look at Greece? Should we look at China? Or should we look at the EU again?
I think the Greece situation is worth looking at.
Let's have a look at the Wall Street Journal. It's on the front page of an awful lot of the papers. We've got the latest last-ditch, 11th hour, 11th minute type chats going on in Brussels.
Yes. You know, I think that there's a huge risk here if we lose Greece as being part of the European Union. It will send, I think, a message to the Union that an exit is possible. And I think there's going to be a loss of confidence and fiscal woes that will affect, I think, all the remaining countries. So I think it's in everybody's interest to try and keep Greece in. But Greece has also got to compromise as well.
There's certain elements that look as though they're going to be a little bit more wiggle room, if you like. Another Tsipras and Varoufakis deal has been put on the table. It sounds like there's a little bit of leeway on VAT, which they were up in arms about. They were saying absolutely not. But, I mean, part of that was the finance minister pointing out what happened in Kos, a Greek holiday island. It's suddenly great for tourism. They doubled the number of tourists last year, and they were saying, so how come VAT uptake, what was paid to the Treasury, halved? Yeah. So clearly the Greeks are very good at dodging VAT, but it looks as though that is now a point for discussion with these EU foreign ministers today.
Yes, I think that, you know, with the heads around the table, and I've got a bit of confidence in the Merkels of the world, especially her. You know, I think she's got a head screwed on, and she understands the risks of them staying and going. Yeah. I think it's her objective to keep them in, and I hope that they'll succeed.
It looks like that they really do want to. There's a little sub-article on the front cover of the Daily Telegraph that says, doomed, the euro will ultimately fail. This is a study that suggests that the single currency cannot actually survive, regardless of an 11th hour attempt to keep Greece in, because if they duck out of that, there's a question mark over the whole EU project.
Yes, which is kind of what I was hinting at earlier, that it will send a ripple throughout the Union, so I think it's in everybody's interest to try and make it work.
A little talk about the China Daily, and I love this story. European life attracts the Chinese.
Yes.
It turns out that they're concerned about lifestyle there, and they're all looking for a better life over here.
Apparently, you know...
How many billion?
the pollution is worse there than it is here and in Europe. So the ideal is to leave and get to Europe and have your children given a European education. Europe is a place to be, apparently, if you're in China.
And it sounds like they're going to they're not going for the obvious places either. They're not just going for the UK or France or for Germany. They're looking at Hungary and places like that.
Yeah, and you know they've done their homework. I think that there's
dental care. I understand.
Well, there's this hype about the UK being the place to be. They've done their homework and they realise that there are other options.
Vernal Scott, always a pleasure.